You know, it's always funny to come speak at universities when in the introduction people describe me as someone who hates textbooks, and then here I am talking to people who are reading textbooks. But here I am. I don't actually hate textbooks. Obviously, we were trying to blur those lines between education and entertainment. And I will tell you guys a good bit more about the magazine and the story behind its founding. But before that, I wanted to share a few things with you guys that we have learned in the past year. I think you might find some of these things interesting. The first, the best trivia requires a little extra digging, and I'll explain what I mean by this. One of our more recent books was called In the Beginning, where we talked about the origins of everything from the microwave to the Barbie doll to just about anything we could find. Many of our readers suggested topics for this. And what kept coming up was the origins of various brand names, and one of those was Pepsi-Cola. And we were looking into this, and part of the fun in doing research for Mental Floss is that we realized that often trying to get to the bottom of something, you end up with kind of competing stories. And so we were looking at, trying to ask different people, what was the origin of the name Pepsi-Cola? Well, somebody happened to point out that there was a church across the street from the pharmacy where Pepsi was originally created, and it was an Episcopal church. Does anybody notice anything in common between Episcopal and Pepsi-Cola? It's an anagram, exactly. So you rearrange the letters. So no, they were serious about this. They rearrange the letters, and you find that you may get Pepsi-Cola. Seems like a logical answer there, so right? So most people could have stopped there and said, I bet that's it. That just seems right. So, but the Mental Floss researchers take it a step further. We decided to look at a few other denominations to see if this theory had a hole in it. And we looked at Presbyterians. I don't know if any of you guys have noticed this or not, but Presbyterians is an anagram of Britney Spears. That just didn't work out for us. We thought there was a hole in this theory. So we looked around a little bit more, and we realized, guys, look at me, not this. So we realized that there had to be something else to it. So upon further research, we saw that Pepsi-Cola, which you guys may remember as well as Coca-Cola, were originally marketed as cures for stomachache or dyspepsia. And so it sounds a lot like that. So coming up with a name that may sound like it could be something healthy for you or something that may settle your stomach or be a cure for dyspepsia. So that's the other theory. This is one of the few that we cannot be absolutely 100% sure about the origin of that name, but we're going with the dyspepsia thing. That's just too troubling to think about the whole anagram idea. So that was one of the things that we've learned. The next thing that we learned, some months ago, Mangesh and I had the opportunity to go out to Mountain View, California, where Google is headquartered, to give a talk to the employees there. And we thought, this is supposed to be a really smart crowd. We want to test them. We want to give them something a little bit, an extra challenge and say, you've got to earn your free magazine. When you come in here, in order to get the free magazine, you have to complete a worksheet that we're going to distribute via email to all of the Google employees. Now, you guys won't be able to see this, but I will explain what it is. It wouldn't matter even if you did. It's the world's geekiest crossword puzzle. Now, you could just say that it's really smart clues, but no. Every single answer and every single clue, for that matter, is in a constructed language like Klingon, Elvish, Esperanto, and various other languages like that. So we thought, this is just a joke. Nobody's going to show up with this. Not only did many employees show up with it filled out, they were correcting grammatical mistakes that we had made, punctuation, other things like that. So Google employees are actually that smart. We've done a few other worksheets like this. We like to put them online and see, how much they end up circulating. Another one was, he mentioned the Ben & Jerry's test before. The first one we did was we gave you a bunch of names and you had to tell us whether it was a discontinued Ben & Jerry's flavor or the name of a band we found on MySpace or Facebook. And so that was a fun one for us. Another one that we did not too long ago for St. Patrick's Day, we had quotes and facts. And the quotes were either about St. Patrick or Samuel L. Jackson. If it was about St. Patrick, you circled the clover. If it was about Samuel L. Jackson, you circled the Royale with cheese. And so it was a lot of fun for us to do this one as well. And so we do things like this that do lean a little bit toward the sillier side, but at the same time you walk away having learned something in the end. The next thing I wanted to share with you guys is that we have finally come to the realization, and we are admitting that our readers should have our jobs. They are smarter than we are. And I'll explain what I mean by this. We were looking a couple of years ago at ways to get our readers more involved in the production of new products for Mental Floss, to come up with new and better ideas, to find out what they wanted to see from Mental Floss. And one of our first ways to test this was through quirky t-shirts that we do. A lot of these online. Any of you that have been on the site before have noticed these. We now do some, probably 70 or 80 different shirts for knowledge junkies or nerds, and we just have a lot of fun doing them. So before they got involved, we had these very brilliant shirts that just said Mental Floss. Well, after this, one of our readers submitted an idea at around the time that Pluto had its planetary status removed, and they sent us an idea for a shirt that said Pluto, R.I.P., revolve in peace. And we thought, that's a great idea. And so it just started flying off the shelves for us there in our online store. And so we started inviting our readers to submit other ones. Some of them, when life gives you scurvy, make lemonade. This one is disturbing. It's one of our best-selling shirts. There's no right way to eat a Reese's. I don't know what to make of our readers that this one has done so well for us. Archaeologists will date any old thing. Natural selection, good things come to those who mate. I'm an English major, you do the math. Hobbits are Tolkien minorities. This one is also doing very, very well for us right now. Hokey Pokey Anonymous, the place to turn yourself around. They're getting cornier every week. I mean, they just get cornier. We just groan when we see them. But people like them. Vinny Video Wiki, I came, I saw, I edited collaboratively. I love that one too. And sometimes our readers are accidentally brilliant. Somebody sent a letter to our editor, Neely Harris, and it started out, it said, Dear Miss Harris, I'm no rocket surgeon, but we don't know if that was an accident. We don't know if they meant to say rocket scientist or brain surgeon, but we just didn't want to ask. We just felt it was too brilliant. We immediately paid the guy $150 and said, please let us make a t-shirt. And so we did, and this one has done well for us as well. So it's a lot of fun for us getting to do that. We struggled with that leap of saying, do we really want to do the kind of ancillary products like this? And realized this was one of the best ways to create that dialogue with our readers, that they're coming up with these ideas, we pay them for the ideas, and then we produce the shirts. And so it's become this kind of cult-like following online of what will be the next shirts that are coming out for Mental Floss. The next thing I've learned that if Mental Floss doesn't work out, which it seems that it will at this point, but I have found a plan B, and this has come recently with many of my travels, going to speak at another school. I was in the LaGuardia airport, and a girl sitting across from me was probably 5, 6 years old, and I see her whispering and pointing at me. And I had an appearance on CNN the day before that, and I thought, of course, when you do something like that, maybe somebody noticed, and I thought maybe that's what it is. She noticed that I was on CNN. No. I then hear her whisper to her mom, Mom, it's Woody. And she honestly thought that I was Woody from Toy Story. And so I signed an autograph, told her to giddy up. And so I've now been trying to negotiate with Pixar to see, like if I wear a cowboy hat, can I get paid extra, to do some of these appearances? So I have learned that. I've embraced it, and it's a big hit in the house with my daughter. The next thing I learned, which I felt was appropriate for here, obviously, is Six Flags should hire Hillary Clinton as a spokesperson. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. I guess this was in September, October of last year. We did a story called The Wildest Rides to the White House. And for our covers, as I'll show you many of them in a little while, we try to invite people in with very playful covers. And the cover idea that we went with was of a roller coaster, and we wanted to show various presidents in history riding on a roller coaster. And then we kept looking at image after image after image after image, and there was honestly no fewer than, I'd say, 100 images of Hillary Clinton looking like she was genuinely enjoying a ride on a roller coaster. Now, it's also interesting when we put things like this out because we get blasted from the left and the right for doing something like this, because we actually try to be, despite strong political beliefs one way or the other on the staff, we try to keep Mental Floss out of expressing our political views. We want to be a break from that. There are no shortage of sources for people to go hear political views. And so we wanted to do more of a fun historical piece on interesting trivia about various presidents. And as we were doing this, we kept stumbling on these pictures of Hillary Clinton, and we just couldn't turn away from this. So we had to do this. And so that was one that we did. The next thing was 2008, as you guys realize, was not the nastiest campaign in political history. As we were looking through the facts about various political pieces, we realized that possibly the nastiest campaign in American presidential history was pretty much the first real heated campaign, between Jefferson and Adams. And looking back at some of the pamphlets that were passed around, and what a strange time to realize that these men were not actually out speaking for themselves, that they had other people out there speaking for themselves, or speaking for them, and passing out flyers, and seeing things passed around about, whether Jefferson was calling Adams a hermaphrodite, or whether, somebody was saying that, describing someone as a bastard with, neither the sensibility of a woman nor the fierceness of a man, or whatever it was. Just these strange comments that were made, and that there was no real way to step up to those challenges that were made and be able to defend themselves. And so it was fascinating as we were going through that. That was one of our issues just a few months ago, if you guys got a chance to see that, to realize some of that, and some of the quotes from that were just bizarre. The next thing, I'm sure all of you guys were wondering, yes, cruise control was invented by a blind man. I knew that everybody was curious about that coming in here. And this was one of those things that we have learned that, obviously people get these emails forwarded to them with these lists of facts, and most of the time you realize probably 80 or 90% of those are not true. Well, our readers will frequently get those emails and forward them to us and kind of use us as their fact-checking team and say, was this true? And yes, it was. A guy by the name of Ralph Teeter. Is anybody familiar with his story or have heard of Ralph before? But he was a blind man, blinded at about the age of 5, but he had a real knack for all things mechanical, and just loved engineering and loved the inner workings of an automobile, and spent most of his life as an engineer. And one day he was riding in the car with his attorney, and the attorney kept slowing down and speeding up as he was talking and listening and having conversation, and it was driving Ralph crazy. And so he thought there's got to be some way to come up with a mechanism that can allow us to control the speed, what eventually became to be known as cruise control. So for those of us that face other challenges, you think about the story of somebody like Ralph Teeter and think, I guess we really have no excuses for not accomplishing what we're passionate about accomplishing. So that was fun for us to learn. The next thing that was in our issue that is just now about to hit stands, we do a 10 issue every year. That sounds like I'm saying 10 issue is on your shoe, but 10 issue, where every article is based around the number 10. And we looked at this and started looking at the famous kisses throughout world history. And so yeah, we were looking back at the history of this. I wanted to make sure I got the year right on this. But has anybody ever seen Nanook of the North, what was supposed to be one of the first documentaries, I guess? And when they went up to film this, it was back in 1922, they were trying to find out what Inuit life was really like. But it was kind of cold there. If you can imagine, they live in a cold environment. And so they staged the whole thing. And so they basically made what looked like an igloo and gave it 3 sides, put people inside there, and created this character, Nanook, that was not his real name. The wife that was there was not his real wife. It was not his real house. Nothing about it was real. And so everything was pretty much staged. There were some things that you could walk away having learned from this, or learning from the movie. But what they picked up on is there is a gesture in Inuit culture where usually a mother or father will take their child and kind of put their nose up against the child's cheek and breathe in and out, and it's just a sign of affection. It's a gesture of affection. But it doesn't have anything to do with romance. It doesn't have anything to do with people kissing with their noses, and the whole idea was it began to be spread that it was so cold that their noses may freeze together if it was wet or something like that. So, obviously they kiss just like everyone else kisses. But this is one of the things that we, just like everyone else kiss, but this is one of the things that we really enjoy doing, and that is debunking some of those myths that are out there in our history books or wherever they may be. Other ones that have been favorites of our readers, the fact that the Harlem Globetrotters actually had nothing to do with Harlem. They started in Chicago, and their founder wanted to make it sound like they were more traveled and that they wanted to indicate that they were all African American, and so they just put the name Harlem Globetrotters on them to make that, to try to give that impression. So it's fun for us to be able to debunk various myths like that through the magazine and in other ways. The next thing I wanted to share with you guys is that we may have chosen the wrong name. Now, I do want to get into a little bit of mental floss history to share this story. So this was back in 2000 when we were first starting the magazine. And we were starting it as an on-campus publication at Duke. And we had the opportunity to meet with the president of our university. And we were scared to death about this meeting because we had a lot of respect for the president of our university, and we really wanted to hear what she thought about the idea. So if you can imagine the scene, I was recently called out on this that this was not taken then, and so I admit to that. And what they noticed is that had it been taken then, you would have noticed hair in these locations in college. Does give you an idea of what the magazine industry will do to you. But there we were sitting waiting to go meet with the president of our university. And we told her about the idea for the magazine. We said, look, people live in this fast-paced world. They want to learn a little bit of everything. They want some way to blur the lines between education and entertainment so that they can walk away from this regularly delivered resource feeling a little bit smarter. And we want to call it mental floss. And she paused for what seemed like an eternity, and she looked up and she said, you know, the name is good. I mean, the idea is good, but the name is way off. She said, I'm picturing a magazine called Conversations. Conversations. And so we thought about this a little bit more. Now, one thing that you guys may know being here at the Clinton School is that people that are in important positions always have a lot of secret cameras around them. And unfortunately, as she was looking up, we didn't realize it, but we were being caught on tape reacting. And I was looking at Mangesh as if to say, did she just say Conversations? And he looked back at me as if to say, I think she did. This is awful. But we pulled it together. She looked at us, and we somehow miraculously came side by side and said, Conversations, very interesting. But there's a very good neuroscience department at Duke. So not only did they see what we were thinking on the outside, but on the inside, they were actually able to see what we were really thinking on the inside. But what's scary to me about this is that the neuroscience department at Duke that I mentioned that is very strong is actually able to look at other people's thoughts as well. And we had the president of the university agree to go in, and they put on what's called a brain cap to see what she was thinking about. And now, in retrospect, I get it. I see what she was talking about. And so I'll show you Conversations. The article here, Beekeeping, One Man's Fight to Save a Linking Verb, I just think is so brilliant. So anyway, we'll see. We may have some tough competition out there, but that is one of the things that you may see on the shelves sometime soon. The next thing, there are many reasons to be optimistic despite this recession. We actually decided to push back our next cover story to do what we were calling a happy cover story. 26 reasons to smile, an A to Z of things to be optimistic about. Most of them are forward-looking. Most of them are talking about research that's going on right now, exciting things that are going on to be excited about. What we're also doing is there'll be a sidebar in there talking about some of the things that came out of difficult times. And it was a lot of fun for us to do the research on that to see some of the inventions that came out of tough times. One of them being, you guys probably remember growing up with the double popsicle, where you pulled them apart. You don't see them as much now. You may see them come back again. But the whole idea behind that was getting a 2-for-1. It really was, the origin of that was buying one popsicle but getting two out of it, being able to share and only having to pay for the price of one. Other things, the Ritz cracker wanted to give people the idea that they were eating something very fancy but at an affordable price. Obviously, the game of Monopoly, as many of you guys know, would come out of a tough time. People didn't have a lot of real money, but they had the opportunity to pretend that they did. And so it's fun to look back at all of the things that have come out of tough times that may not have occurred had there not been those difficult times. And the last thing I wanted to share with you guys on this list is that knowledge junkies, as we describe our readers, experience an aha moment when they first see mental floss. So for and what I mean by that is it's incredibly important to us that whatever people see when they first look at a mental floss project, that there's a smile and that they get the idea behind it. The name says it, mental floss, which to us sounds smart, but also like it's something that doesn't take itself too seriously. And so with everything that we put out, we try to help to let people smile with that first impression. Our very first issue, the very first newsstand issue after Duke was we wanted to find an image that communicated what the name communicated, and that was, here's something that's smart, that doesn't take itself too seriously. And we stumbled across the image that almost everyone in here has probably seen before, and it's one of history's greatest geniuses, Albert Einstein, in a moment where he's not taking himself too seriously. And that, to us, said it. Here is one of history's greatest geniuses with a sense of humor. And so we decided to do that as we continued. The next issue our Genius issue, a spoof of Abbey Road with Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Bob Dylan, and Mark Twain strolling across Abbey Road. Some of our readers noticed this. It wasn't a plan of ours to begin with, and they said, did you mean to put Einstein on both of these first two covers? Are you going to do that forever? And we said, of course, yeah, that was always our plan. And so you'll notice Einstein sometimes in the background with Lies Your Mother Told You, sometimes more prominent. What's the difference here? How to tell the difference between Bach and Beethoven, Monet from Manet, Diamonds and Fakes, or Einstein and Einstein in a toupee. It's funny what we get letters about. You know, you'd think we would get letters about the actual content, but no, the majority of our letters had to do with whose hair was that. Had a lot of guesses for Marv Albert. I think it was actually Ted Koppel's hair that we went with for this one. So other covers that we've done more recently, sometimes Einstein's more hidden. He's one of the bubbles coming out of the fish there. Even more hidden there on this issue, kind of up in the corner there. This is what I was mentioning, the 10 issue, 10 sports heroes neglected by Wheaties, 10 vice presidents actually worth knowing, 10 things your body can do after you die, on and on and on. The Golden Lobe Awards. So that first impression that someone has of the magazine is so critical for us. The biggest questions of 2009. You didn't know Einstein had a body like that, did you? So, this was our first book, Condensed Knowledge. And, you know, the Campbell's Condensed Soup here, spoof is obvious, but the idea for us was to create a source that people could go to for fun facts about all of the subject areas they should be studying in a liberal arts education. So a chapter on history, a chapter on psychology, on biology, and so on and so on. And so that was a lot of fun for us to work on. Now, if that was everything people should have learned in school, the next book was everything you wanted to learn but didn't have an opportunity to. So that was Forbidden Knowledge, where all of the lists were based around the 7 deadly sins. And so each chapter was one of the deadly sins. Cocktail Party Cheat Sheets. This one was fun for us to work on. You know, there are those subjects that people hear about from time to time that you're embarrassed to admit that you don't really know that much about them. And so that was our goal here, was to say, if somebody comes up to you and asks you a question about Alexander the Great, chances are you'd probably freeze if they said, give me, 90 words on Alexander the Great, teach me a little bit there, or the Dead Sea Scrolls, or what is a black hole, or those kinds of questions that we wanted to be able to answer in a fun way and structure it so that you do have the cheat sheet, but then you have extra credit where you learn some of those additional facts that are fun to drop here and there. That was a fun project for us to work on. As was mentioned before, Med School in a Box, Law School in a Box, which was recently ranked the #1 box law school in America by my mother. So that was a good one. So MBA in a Box was our most recent project. The History of the World. This one was kind of a bigger project for us to take on. You know, most of the Mental Floss projects, the information is kind of in bite-sized pieces. And the History of the World was not exactly, but it was a lot of fun for us to work on. And the goal was to say, you know, we've all had world history textbooks before, but they're not always as entertaining or as playful as you read through them. And obviously there's some subjects that we can't treat in a playful manner, but we still want to make them as accessible as possible. And so that was one of our most recent projects. To the one that was just released about a month ago called Be Amazing, which was an historical how-to guide. How to glow in the dark, how to control the weather, perform your own surgery, get out of jury duty, identify a witch, colonize a nation, impress a girl, make a zombie, start your own religion. I mean, what a how-to guide, right? And so we actually went back and looked at historical examples or stories behind all of these to be able to share some of those anecdotes. And so those are the things that we do at Mental Floss. Those are some of the things that we've learned in the past year. It's amazing how quickly 8 years now has flown by as we've done this, but our mission from the very beginning to now has stayed the same, and that is we want people to walk away from anything Mental Floss feeling a little bit smarter, but we also want them to walk away with a smile on their face. So blurring the lines between education and entertainment is critical for us. We have a lot of fun doing it. The staff brainstorming sessions, as you can imagine, are a blast to be involved in as we're thinking about what we're going to be doing in the next issues. We get a lot of feedback from our readers online. The conversation has really stepped up there where they're providing many of the ideas and leads for stories that we might tackle. And so it's just a blast for us every day to be able to work on this. And so I appreciate you guys inviting me, but I did want to give you guys a chance to ask questions if anybody has any questions. Over here?
If you do raise your hand, we'll get you mic.
Oh,
Hold
okay.
on, Annie. Annie's missed a couple programs, so she's ready to go.
I'm the Helen Thomas of this school.
Oh, okay, good.
One of the things I was sitting here thinking while you were doing that, as a retired educator, I remember when they used to send all of the, quote, bad kids to the principal's office, and they'd be sitting outside of the office. And I noticed how artistic some of them are,
Right.
and they're expressing themselves. And when I think in terms of the growing population of white-collar crimes, and we can think of one of the highest one right now,
Yeah.
the rich man. And then when we think in terms of the perception that they are not gifted and talented,
Right.
it's misplaced giftedness.
Right.
And I was wondering if in incarcerated places, and I've been at federal prisons as a commission member, and I've been at state, and I've been at county, there's a common denominator that when they're in prison, this creativity has to find a way to express themselves. And I was just wondering, what kind of material would you get out of the prisons, particularly now during this time of depression?
You know, it's interesting that you asked the question. Everybody was able to hear the question. It really is interesting how many letters and interesting ideas we get from people in prison. Now, you know, obviously we realize they have more time, and so they do have the time to sit down and write something to us, but at the same time, it was really surprising to us. And I will be the first to admit that I, was completely shocked by the intelligence and the creativity and the knowledge coming out of some of these individuals about things not only related to the subject matter within the magazine, but related to the magazine industry. I mean, people sending us letters giving us warnings about how to navigate this legal issue because we may be sued by this party or this party. And I thought, how do you know these things that we've had to research to understand how to run this business? And so it's been interesting for us in that way. Now, kind of taking a step back from there, not necessarily in prison, but going back to kind of the high school age students, how many parents have written letters saying, my student doesn't have any interest in school, and this has been one of the first publications or source of reading material that they have actually enjoyed going to and reading and wanting to share those facts. Now, in many ways we don't know what to make of it always, but we are pleased to know that, those people are enjoying this, and definitely seeing that there are, obviously millions of people out there that are gifted, but whether you want to describe some of them as underachievers or some of them as misguided or some of them, whatever the reason, it's been fun for us to see part of those communities reaching out to us. So, great question. Yes?
Do you use Google for research?
Do we use Google for research? People use that. Well, obviously, we use Google for research, but people ask us more frequently, can you take a guess what website people ask us do we actually use? Is Wikipedia. Yeah. Wikipedia is one of the most incredible starting points. I mean, I just can't imagine a better starting point for research for much of what we're doing. Now, obviously, we're not going to take something from Wikipedia and put it in the magazine and feel confident that it's 100% true. But there is such an incredible amount of information and good information on Wikipedia, and then it was just a matter of taking it steps beyond that to do a lot of the fact-checking. Google as well. I mean, that's one of the first places to start, and it's actually a great place to start for fact-checking. You take some of these facts that we find in the magazine. One of the things our fact-checkers do is they'll take each fact statement from the magazine and go through and plug it in to Google to see where some of these facts are turning up. It's also a way to kind of screen for plagiarism. It's also, I mean, there are so many positive ways to be using Google that, yeah, every single person on staff is probably using it, dozens of times every single day. So, question?
Ready?
No, sorry.
I was just curious as to what is the one myth that you were just certain about that you knew the answer to, and then upon further investigation, you were busted.
What was the one myth that we were, it's hard to say. I mean, a couple of the facts that I shared about where you hear something and you think that just can't be true. I mean, the example I gave was probably the one when somebody sent us that list of facts where they said, cruise control was invented by a blind guy. I just thought that probably wasn't true. I mean, even though it's not that would be impossible, but some things, that's an example of one. Putting me on the spot there with some of the others. I mean, I think that, again, that's probably why I shared that, but that's probably the one that came to mind But yeah, we see that all the time, that people will send us those emails that they get. And more often than not, the facts aren't true. I mean, when a fact looks too good to be true, it frequently is. So, and some of them that you can't really know, some of that you can't really know for sure. They're facts about, we love the kind of personality quirks of various geniuses in history, and there was a story about Salvador Dali having a paranoia of transportation or riding in trains, so apparently he would ride in the front of a train so he would get to his destination faster. And as you go in, like, trying to fact check that is difficult, but it was funny for us to learn nonetheless. So.
Over here.
Hello. Hey, my name's Chad Williams, and I'm a student here. But I'm sort of curious about what your staff size is and what's your circulation now, and also what was the tipping point that you knew this is gonna make it.
Okay, I'm going to repeat your question. That was in case some of you guys couldn't hear that one. Staff size, that was 3 questions, Chad. That's a lot. And this is a test. And the last one was, what was tipping point. Okay, so to answer the first question, our full-time staff is 13. It's a little misleading because with the nature of what we do, because we're covering so many different subjects, we rely on a number of freelance writers, a number of freelance researchers, and have a number on contract when we're focusing on specific projects. So for the history book, for example, during that time, there were many people that were essentially spending, all of their working hours on mental floss projects, but they're not full-time staff members. And we rely on many different, bloggers on the website. We probably have 8 daily bloggers and, maybe 15 more that contribute regularly. As far as the size of our audience, the online audience has grown very rapidly. The last few months, we've had between 4 and 5 million unique visitors to the site every single month. As far as the magazine readership, it's about 300,000 regular readers of the magazine. And so from, project to project, it varies. But I was telling somebody earlier that, that magazine readership is a little bit smaller, or is smaller than the website, but it's a very loyal audience. And we know that whenever we come out with anything, that they will be the first to go to it. The tipping point. I was actually giving a talk at an entrepreneurial conference not too long ago, and was sharing the fact that I think most entrepreneurs would agree with me on this, that for us, there was never a moment where we looked and could look back and say, you know what, we've made it. I mean, now I can say I feel like we're doing well and things will continue to go well, but there was never a day that I woke up and thought, yeah, something happened, or we had this big break or that big break. For us, it's much more kind of waking up every day and trying to take one step forward. And it's just this kind of very organic, we didn't spend anything on marketing the magazine, unlike most other publications that spend millions on direct mail or other kind of traditional marketing. We have always grown by word of mouth and very organically. And so for us, it is exactly that. It's just kind of getting up every day, taking one step forward, work on a new project, work on this. And so it's been a little different than I would have expected when we first started.
Over there.
I was going to ask you a question also about your staff, but
Yeah.
that addressed it. Will you comment for just a minute about the process that goes into putting this together start to finish, in terms of whether it's time frame or what a day looks like for you or your staff and making it happen?
For me, it would be very different as far as than most of the editorial staff. Mangesh and I are still very much involved in the early stage of each issue. And so months out, a year in advance in many ways, for the cover story especially, we'll start thinking about what we're going to be doing for the next year's cover stories. And we'll have a brainstorming session. We'll reach out to many of our writers. There are probably 30 people that we go to when we start to think about doing a major story, for whether it's a cover story or other feature stories, to say, here's something we're thinking about, help us improve this idea. And those writers will come back to us with new ideas that we may add to it, or may, the concept may evolve over time. This one, for example, the 25 most influential books of the last 25 years, was a real beast to put together, as you can imagine. And we knew there was no way we were going to put out something that everybody agreed with, but we wanted to find stories that had a real world influence, that were not just, oh, that's a great book, I enjoyed reading that. And so for a cover story like that, again, you start working about a year in advance of the story coming out, and have the ability to to adapt if you need to, or to make some changes as things go along. Other sections of the magazine, like Scatterbrain, which is much more bite-sized, much of that work is just being done 2-3 months before an issue comes out. We have an idea well in advance of what's going to happen. But our editorial staff, which is really only about 5 of us in many of those meetings, are taking the information that we've gotten from our freelance writers, from other staff members, and trying to shape what an issue will look like. And, it's nice being bi-monthly. We do have the opportunity to be flexible and to say, let's change these plans. We didn't know what the level of this recession would be at this point, but we do have the ability to stop and say, you know what, let's push that out. Let's do a story on 26 reasons to be happy this year, those kinds of things. As far as my role and Mangesh's role, what our daily life is like, we're kind of a left brain, right brain combo, and it's worked really well for us where, I'm more on the strategy side, more kind of thinking about what are we going to be doing a year from now, what are we going to be doing 2 years from now, whereas Mangesh is the one that is overseeing the content in every single project that we do. He may not be reading every single word of every single book that we put out, but he's definitely looking at the feel and the personality of every single thing we do. He is very intimately involved in every article for the magazine to make sure that its personality screams mental floss. So we kind of have those different roles, whereas when an issue comes out or a book comes out, it was something I was thinking about 2 years ago, whereas he's thinking about as it really kind of approaches the launch of that specific project. So I think you had a question here.
I thought early in your speech about, real traumatic instances in history like a tsunami or 9/11 or slavery, and you did mention it. So how do you tackle those things, or do you kind of step away from those events in history?
That's a great question. Early on, we struggled with this and did more stepping away from it. And then we had a pitch for an article that was called War Torn. And it was kind of an overview of the various hot spots around the world of real tension. And we realized that we had an opportunity here to help people understand what was going on in Rwanda, what was going on in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, what was going on in various kind of hot spots around the world. And obviously that's not something we wanted to treat lightly, and it's not something we wanted to treat with our kind of typical playfulness. But we did have an opportunity to educate people and to make this information accessible, because unfortunately most people aren't going to take the time to read a book about each one of those conflicts. And so we worked with a few reporters and even had, but the first time we did it, we even put a disclaimer at the beginning of the article that said, look, we know that mental floss makes light of just about anything we talk about. This is one of those where we can't do that, but it is one of those where, as part of our mission to help people feel smarter, we feel like we have an opportunity to bring this to a level that everybody can understand and make it more accessible. And so we've done that with a number of other subjects that we've covered over time. So it's a great question.
Did you have one? No?
No, she didn't even want to ask a question. You're just trying to make her ask a question?
I thought you had one. Sorry, Allie.
Any other questions?
There you go.
Yes, I'm a subscriber. I love the magazine. One of my favorite parts of it is the featured countries that come at near the end of the magazine. And is that all online research? It almost seems like you need somebody on the ground on some of those.
Oh, on the Spinning the Globe section at the back of the magazine. No, it's early on when we had just started, the reporters were not always people who had spent significant amount of time there, and we realized, early on, these articles can't be legitimate. They can't be all that informative or giving us any real new information if they're not written by people who either are there now or have spent significant time there. And so in the last couple of years, that has definitely been one of the requirements, is that anyone authoring that section has to have spent significant time there. And in fact, most of them now, the reporters are actually going there after knowing this is going to be their assignment. Because, early on, that Spinning the Globe section was a lot of history. And while that's great, it wasn't something that was all that unique. And it was something that people could pick up in a history book. And we felt like, shouldn't we be able to give people an idea of what modern pop culture is like in these locations? If we're going to be covering the Australian outback, which was one that we did recently. Shouldn't we give people an idea of what entertainment is like to them? What is exciting for a 15-year-old in the outback of Australia? What is exciting for, a 15-year-old in Russia? What is exciting, to try to give people an idea of what modern life is really like. So yeah, we do have reporters that are spending time there. Oh, good. Well, I appreciate you hearing that. And we did plant him. We did ask him to say that. So, but thank you for your kind comments. So.
Anybody else? Alex.
I actually just had a quick question. We were talking a bit earlier about the pirate story that you guys put together, and given how topical that is and your moving of that story, but could you tell us a little bit about how long ago you thought about that? Was it a year ago that you thought, hey, we need a story about pirates?
I think it was for our 10 issue, that is the one that's coming out. It will be on newsstands in a couple of weeks. Subscribers probably already have. Do you have that one yet? It's on its way now. One of the stories was 10 things you didn't know about Somali pirates. And it was just strange timing that was when that was coming out. Obviously, this has been a real emerging problem, or one that people have become more aware of in recent months or in the past year, even though it's been an issue for some time now. But it was just strange coincidence. We decided to put that story in this issue, I want to say about 6 months ago. And as soon as we realized what was going on and the issue was coming out, we immediately put this out and started sending it out to sources like Yahoo and CNN and a number of those. And they're partners of ours, and they jumped on it, picked it up, and start running it on their site. So it was a very rare event for us to have something that felt very timely to be able to put it out there. One of the things that we, kind of flip side of that, one of the things that we like about Mental Floss and that many of our readers enjoy is that it is relatively timeless, that people can pick up an issue now, read it, or they could put it down and read it a year from now and still feel like they're learning something that's relevant. Online is a different story. We do try to pick up on the big story of the day, and news breaks about Bernie Madoff. Well, we want to be able to jump in and talk about other Ponzi schemes throughout history, within the next day or so.
Here we go.
Is there a way to get back issues? Yes, there is. Thank you, plant number 2. Yes, on our website, mentalfloss.com, almost all of our back issues, some of the very earliest, are not available. But we have something. It's funny to see when people learn about Mental Floss, and really the ones that really fall in love with it, they come and buy what's called our Complete As It Gets set, which I can't even, it seems like it would weigh your car down. It's so heavy. But they order it, and we ship it to them, and so it is fun. So, yeah, we definitely try to keep the magazine feeling very timeless in that way. So, yes.
Hold on 1 second. Oh. Thank you.
I'm a teacher, and I'm always feeling pressured to be entertaining and informative and still be fun. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering, you said your advertising was really basically word of mouth, but do you ever just send free copies to libraries so they could encourage high school students to read them?
Mm-hmm. We do try to, there's a certain number of copies with every issue that we send out to various sources, from new media sources to libraries to schools, and we're now doing a little bit more partnering with academic programs. There are a few international baccalaureate programs that have really taken a liking to the magazine and are subscribing for their students, and we give them a great discount for it, just mainly to try to break even on it, but get the magazine in front of them. And we want to do more of that. And we've actually even been approached recently by a few schools that want to use Mental Floss products as fundraisers. They're tired of selling fruit and wrapping paper and want to start selling, Mental Floss T-shirts and, things like that. So we're trying to do more and more outreach to the schools, and we're actually signed a 12-title deal with HarperCollins to do a children's series. That will start, and not a magazine, but a book product that will be out within the next couple of years. So,
well, thank you, Will, for coming.